be here. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. Have been working with Espen at Payr for maybe the last 2 months, thinking about the problem of matching people to companies in a more effective way. And I think what Espen has done with Payr is really exciting, and I think it's going to allow us to quickly start applying some really interesting approaches that we'll talk about in more detail here today. Basically, I'm going to split my time into 2 different talks here. The first one is going to be around the Payr experience and how personality will allow us to match people to companies for a better experience on both sides. Then I'm going to introduce an idea that we've been developing at psyML called digital humanity. In working in the field of AI, there's a lot of issues that we've been frankly sweeping under the rug in AI that we'll talk about, and I think there's going to have to be either a change in how we're approaching AI, or we're walking into another almost climate change like experience where we have no idea where AI is going to end up, but yet we're going to accept it. So our idea is this notion of digital humanity, which is kind of a reconceptualization of AI. So tackling quite a bit here today, but I think with any luck, it'll be informative as well as fun experience. Now, to talk about the Payr experience. Psychologists define personality as the unique patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that make each person unique. Next slide. In this regard, we regard personality as the DNA of one's humanity. And to get a sense of the complexity of personality, we need to put it into context, which is the human brain. The human brain is undoubtedly one of the most amazing organisms in the entire universe, with hundreds of billions of neurons, each with at least 10 different connections, making for a system that's truly one of a kind. Now, moving from the brain to personality, that's a tale of its own, but much of this process has been made possible by a little-known branch of psychology that's known as psychometrics. Psychometrics is basically the science of measuring latent traits and abilities. So, when we talk about humans, we're constantly talking about things that there's no way to objectively measure. We talk about, this person's really smart, this person's really funny. But what is being smart? What is being funny? All of those are things that we've either kind of intuitively picked up a meaning for, or in the sense of psychometrics, we've actually developed a scientific process of being able to put numbers to these traits so that we can start to measure them in a scientific manner. With psychometrics, we developed measures of intelligence. We've developed measures of executive functioning, of different psychological traits, and we've also developed measures of personality. Interestingly, the ability to define personality began back around World War I. It's kind of interesting how many advances in psychology and science in general have been associated with different wars, but back in World War I in America, I mean, those that know history know that World War I was a brutal experience. Just, kind of the first mass example of killing that our civilization has experienced. And in the States, we started noticing very quickly that people coming back from the war, there was a significant percentage of them who were psychologically altered forever. So where personality testing started to come from was we wanted to be able to send people to the war that would come back not being, shell-shocked, as it was called at the time. That met with some good effect, but I mean, to this day, it's still very hard to be able to predict with any exact, outcome that we know beforehand someone who won't be affected with PTSD and things like that. So, that goes to show that, our assessments are fairly valid, but in terms of, a lot of specific kind of diagnostic information, we still have a ways to go. Next slide. Regarding personality, it's only been in the last 20, 30 years that academics have really come to a consensus understanding of what the dimensions are that exist, whether we're in Norway or the States or in Asia, across the world. We now have what's called the hexaco model. 6 dimensions. The first one, honesty. Well, unfortunately, these aren't in the order of hexaco, but to go through the acronym, the first is honesty, second is emotionality, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. These 6 dimensions provide a unique lens to look at ourselves and to look at the world, everyone around us. Those of you who took the quiz over here, how many of you found the answer to be accurate, basically? Anyone? Okay, so maybe about half of you that took it found it accurate. That's certainly not the level that we want to get it at. But interestingly, what we've put up here, it's only 6 questions, which it is really took us a long time in the States to get it down, to find the right words. Now we have to kind of go through that process in Norway. And while these 6 dimensions have been found to exist in Norway, what we have to do is find the right normative data, because you go from culture to culture, the dimensions exist, but they exist in kind of different levels. You know, like I would guess, just, you know, being in Norway for all of 3 or 4 days, I think you folks are probably a bit more conscientious than the average folks, you know, in the United States. You know, just by seeing how well kept the streets are, and all that would, to me, suggest there's likely a bit higher overall rating on conscientiousness here. But in those kind of things, we need to, you know, get data. So take the test, and you know, kind of norm the instruments to how you folks are here. But my confidence in our ability to, you know, next time, you know, we come here and you know, a group of people take this test, that we'll be getting more like 80% of you saying, hey, that's really spot on. You know, I'm sure we'll be able to do that for Payr. But the end result of all this is that using something, you know, as brief as six questions, we're going to be able to place people onto the hexacode dimensions. And what's really cool about that is we know so much about, you know, these dimensions that we can start making inferences about, you know, your individual preferences that go far beyond just the information contained in those 6 questions. Because of all the validation that we've done to, you know, make sure this actually represents, you know, kind of how our brains are all organized along these 6 dimensions, that we can use that, you know, very short amount of information to really know what you're all about and where you fit. Next slide. We've one thing that we do is to use information from these 6 dimensions to basically come up with the type for every individual. That's when you got your information here, you got your personality type. What we do is just identify where you differ the most from the average. In this case, we were measuring your average according to American standards, not according to Norwegian standards, which is probably where we got into trouble with some of you. But nonetheless, we find that being just using that simple typing system, we can know a lot about an individual person. Next slide. This is from data when I worked at a fintech company called Payoff, where we put everyone into one of the types and then looked at different financial variables. So here we have income, financial stress, savings, and debt. And you can see that different types have very different financial profiles. So the free spirit, that's someone who's low on conscientiousness. So that's someone who not only doesn't mind a little chaos, actually kind of will introduce chaos to make sure you know, things stay interesting. But that person doesn't do well with the traditional financial system. They're going to end up with low income, high financial stress, low savings, and high debt. All based on their personality. Not because they're a bad person, but just because their personality isn't one that really understands the need to, get into their account every month and balance their checkbook, things like that. That's just not in their repertoire. Whereas someone over on the other side, like the rock is someone that's low on emotionality. So for the rock, everything is a very logical, unemotional decision. So that person just made for our financial system. They don't view things emotionally. Everything, like I said, it's a logical decision. And then we see some people, other people kind of fall in the middle. The spark, that's someone that's high emotionality. And if you view the world, if your first response is to respond from your guts, you're not going to do terribly well in the financial system. It's all kind of the blooming obvious. We all know that, but we don't take it into account in how we deal with people, particularly, as an online company, where it's all just one size fits all. And if you don't like it, sorry. But there's no need for that in a digital environment. I mean, we can certainly present information to 12 different types. I mean, computers are quite good at that. It's just that we haven't taken that information about people and to take the time and develop the feedback to be able to really individualize our services for people. So that's why I find the example of Payr to be so relevant to what we do. If we can use personality, another example from my own experience, where when we developed eHarmony, my mandate as the researcher was to see if I could develop a predictive model that would put people together for long-term relationship success. So what we did was develop a questionnaire, validated it. It was a very long questionnaire at that time. And we started out, it was like over 400 items. And, all the VCs were like, nobody's going to take this. But once, people started to see that, they got quality matches there, they started putting up with the long questionnaire. I think people's attention span has systematically gotten shorter since then. I wouldn't recommend to Espen that he asked people to take 400 item questionnaire to join Payr. But at that time, it worked. So, the long-term net effect of putting people together based on their personality, using a model that predicted marital satisfaction amongst married people. That's where we did all our research, was in married couples, to try and predict satisfaction, which we were able to predict quite effectively. Made the assumption that if we put people before they got married together using a model that predicted satisfaction, they'd be happier in long-term relationships. And the divorce rates actually are starting to bear that up. There was a large study published in 2016 that found the divorce rate for eHarmony couples was almost half of that of Match.com, which is the other large dating company in the States. But interestingly, Match.com's divorce rate was was significantly lower than what we found in what we like to call the wild, where people dare take it into their own hands. But their divorce rate was lower than just finding people here and there, which may indicate that even just going online indicates that people are more intentional, more reflective about that very important decision. So all this to say, now we're turning all this information towards evaluating how, next slide, how companies can fit with individuals. We certainly know that people don't, that personality is a huge factor in how people make decisions about who they want to engage with. It's not all, this logical decision. People don't make the decision based entirely on price or based entirely on service. There are other factors at play, probably the majority of factors, that aren't being taken into account. So that, by just taking a quick inventory, we're hoping that that's going to allow us to get all this other aspects of who we're all about into the equation, so that we can see which companies really align with people and take stress out. I mean, it's all about getting stress out of lives, and if we can make the matches, if we can make matches in life and relationships, next we start thinking about making matches with organizations and companies. It makes all the sense in the world. Another thing that we're also hoping to explore as we get deeper into this is the personality of brands. Brands also, they have personality. A lot of them reflect the personality of how of their founders. I'm sure just being around Payr, it seems very consistent with the vision that Espen has described for this company. Companies don't exist in a vacuum. I mean, people start companies. People use companies to express certain strengths that they see in people. So all of this should hopefully give us a better fit in life, and one additional source of stress that we can take out of people's lives. So that is what I wanted to say about the Payr and psyML experience. It's just starting. It's one that I hope continues for decades to come. Now I want to shift topics here and introduce to you the notion of digital humanity. Next slide. Popular enthusiasm for artificial intelligence is rising dramatically despite widespread ignorance of what this technology is really all about. A study in 2016 found that 66% of consumers from 5 global markets, the States, Canada, UK, China, and Brazil, reported knowing nothing about AI, while over 50% of the same sample said that they thought individually they would benefit from AI. So people know nothing about AI, yet a sizable percentage of them think that it's going to be good for them on an individual level. Unfortunately, popular misunderstanding of AI is understandable when you look at the process by which AI is poorly understood even by those who develop it. Even though these same developers are developing products that are just mind-blowing in their outcomes. So that may seem like there's a lot of contradictions here when I say that developers don't understand how the technology works, but yet the technology is giving us, self-driving cars. How's that possible? Well, given the demands of the current AI, and next slide, the demands of the current environment of AI is not to advance knowledge about AI, but it's simply to advance performance. So typically how an AI program is developed is that a developer will have a problem, let's say to understand people ordering at a drive-through restaurant. And so that, people are just coming up to the speaker saying, I want, 6 fries, 2 Cokes. Oh no, make that 6 Cokes and 2 fries. You need to get that right. So a developer in that instance will typically go find a good voice-to-text program and get that, which is a certain AI network. Then, next slide, then let's say, so they start with the bottom level of a neural network, which makes a certain assumptions and reduces the data into, a word vector that has 93% accuracy. But then to make it optimized for this particular restaurant, they'll stack on another neural network that they can put in the menu of the restaurant and optimize for those particular words. And voila, now they have a system that is 97% accurate. But now they still don't know even how the bottom level's working, but yet now we've stacked on another net on top of that. And we have a system that certainly, next slide, runs afoul of Occam's razor, to say nothing of the age-old goal of parsimony. Now, this next slide, this win at the expense of knowledge approach is currently producing incredible results. A situation that likely guarantees this haphazard process will continue. Next slide, while this approach would be troublesome were it being applied to a technology with finite and known endpoints, say building the proverbial better mousetrap. There is currently no way for anyone to fully comprehend how AI will progress, making our lack of understanding of how AI currently works exponentially more troublesome. While there is no certainty how AI will develop, experts and laymen alike accept that the likely outcome will be a condition where digital machines can apply logic and learning to all situations they encounter. Thus, unlike the narrow AI of today, where a machine that can drive a car cannot apply that experience to picking stocks, when machines achieve a state that's commonly called artificial general intelligence, or AGI, such generalizability will occur. Now, AGI and its big brother, what's called superintelligence, which is described as intelligence capable of an understanding that will allow the systems to actually design better systems themselves, basically taking the need for humans out of the loop. Most of us accept that as an inevitability, but yet we also see it along the lines of a glowing Terminator-like orb watching us for eternity. It's either that background of malevolence, or it's Alexa denying my request to play the Sex Pistols, insisting I listen to the latest interpretive reading of a Jeff Bezos email. A clinical psychologist friend of mine has a theory that AGI is actually the Rorschach test of our times. In the face of incomplete information, it is a truism that humans project our unconscious fear. Or as the Jungian therapist Mary Louise von Franz said, wherever known reality stops, where we touch the unknown, there we project an archetypal image. Out of this, many of our brightest minds currently see in AGI much of what Hollywood does. An amoral, zero-sum, testosterone-laden entity inexorably driven to become the most powerful and dominant entity possible. The pace of AI development has been all but impossible to predict, but given the advances we're seeing in robotics, signal detection, pattern recognition, even the most skeptical folks around us accept that AGI is not a matter of if, but when. This seems to go against common sense, but yet it's very much, next slide, in line with our tendency to minimize or even deny future threats until they're a fact of life. In the U.S., we see this amongst an ardent group of Trump supporters who live on this island, Tangier Island, in the Chesapeake Bay. Residents here are actually seeing their land slip away under the rising waters of a warming planet, but yet they attribute it to quote-unquote erosion. But before we lapse too much into self-righteousness, I contend that we in the AI community are basically doing very much the same thing, moving ahead with unequivocal support for AI, while we know it's only a matter of time until one of us stumbles onto AGI, or more likely, DARPA or some other less than humanistic organization creates full-blown AGI. What we should be doing, if we really wanted to be moving forward towards AGI, is applying each of these neural network and deep learning systems to the experimental process, where we would work to understand what is happening in each level of a neural network. It's not like neural networks are magic. What all they are mathematical transformations that occur in a systematic way. They're very complex, and if we're going to understand them, we're going to have to, put a lot of effort into them. But what's our alternative? I mean, what it seems like, is we're hell-bent on building a technological Tower of Babel. Our argument at psyML is not that we stop developing AI. Our desire to advance is one of the beauties of our species. We're not going to slow down. It's full speed ahead. But what we are promoting is that we place AI into a traditional scientific model. How do we do this? More recently in my career, I've been intrigued, next slide, by the psychological traits that have been coming to the fore under the general rubric of positive psychology. Traits like resilience, wisdom, compassion, altruism, gratitude, and possibly the capstone of our humanity, which is empathy. All of these are summarized in this PARMA or PERMA model here. As I've been working on developing assessments for these traits, it's become more and more apparent to me and to all of us working in this area that these traits not only define our state as humans every bit as much as effectively as does our intelligence. A strong case can be made that these are the traits that evolution is optimizing for as we move into an information society. Intelligence is not what will define our success in the information age. Rather, it's our ability to incorporate things like gratitude. We see people that do simple experiments, like start writing down 3 things that they're grateful for every day, and we see their blood pressure coming down. We see altruists live longer. There's all this evidence that these are the traits that even our basic evolution is optimizing for, that allow us to live longer. We don't see that more intelligent people are living longer. In fact, you get to higher levels of intelligence, you actually see greater incidence of physical and mental abnormalities. But you see more resilience, you see more empathy, you consistently see more productive and more satisfied people. While this notion that pro-social traits reflect the cutting edge of our evolutionary development certainly requires further evaluation, along with data from a few hundred generations, The point at hand is that the assumption that intelligence is the human trait that should be the entire focus of our efforts in creating advanced digital machines is fundamentally flawed. Our humanity and arguably the future of our society is not dependent on advances in intelligence. I mean, we only have to look around and see, incidents of depression, anger, loneliness, racism. These are the trends that demand that we look to our entire humanity. Yet we continue to focus on intelligence. What would an effort to create digital machines capable of understanding humans actually look like? First of all, I don't think it would be called AI. That's why we're starting to use the term digital humanity. While advanced machines may well decide that there's a better word than digital to summarize their contributions, we use it to denote non-deterministic algorithmic solutions. And we use the word humanity as a catch-all that defines all of our humaneness, the psychological, emotional, physical, mental, cognitive, and possibly even spiritual aspects of our human being. The scope of digital humanity may seem overwhelming, but what we've been seeing in trying to develop machines to reflect this humanity is quite doable. At psyML, we're trying to create digital humanity by developing chatbots that both read our emotions from our social speech, from our voices. A voice contains so many cues about how we're feeling. How many words we're saying, our inflections, all of these are tells to our emotional state. Computers are great at reading that. They're probably as good as we are at being able to identify unique kind of patterns in our vocal in our vocalizations. So computers are great at understanding from text as well. We have deep learning systems that are able to understand both personality and emotions, even from tweets. It doesn't take a whole lot of language if you have a well-trained system. Then the next step is to use that to communicate back to the person understanding of where they're at. You look at even the most sophisticated psychotherapists, and what are they doing? 90% of what they're doing is reflection, is just making that person feel understood. We can create machines that do that. And I honestly think if we can create machines that can understand us, I mean, what a potential boon to society that would be. The problem with psychotherapy is it doesn't scale. But if we can create experiences that mimic that experience of unconditional positive regard, that's kind of the basic of Rogerian therapy. That's a game changer. So I think, to do this, we change our ideas about what is the outcome of these digital machines that we want to create. And we don't want to create, yeah, super intelligence is going to come, but we want that super intelligence to be developed in concert with empathy, with understanding, with compassion. If you have, if you develop an AI that's compassionate, you don't have to worry about it taking over the world and turning us into slaves. In that context, AI starts to become our partner. And it's, we can use its advantages to ours, and it's going to do the same. Digital humanity, I think, can even provide us with a better framework in which we can do science around these advanced digital interfaces. I think, it's going to be straightforward to see if we can develop compassion, if we can develop machines that, through experiments that are actually making people develop self-esteem, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. These are the things that we need people to develop machines and the experiments that will see if it's working. So in thinking about developing the ability to help people feel self-esteem and value, obviously the flip side of that is someone use that same technology to manipulate people. So that's where the movement of digital humanity has to take hold. If we're going to keep that from happening, it's only the developers and the entrepreneurs that are going to keep that from happening, and they're going to keep compassion and keep gratitude in the equation. So that's where, next slide, we are proposing a preliminary digital human manifesto, where we propose, just a number of basic humanistic values to how we develop these digital machines. We understand this is very much a process. It's going to have to take the engagement of all the developers, or at least a good percentage of developers in AI, to commit to making this paradigm shift to digital humanity. What we're proposing is we're starting a site. It's up now, digitalhumanity.co, where we'll start a debate on what the principles of digital humanity should be. We have a starting point here that I encourage you to look at your convenience and to comment on, to get engaged in this process. We're hoping that, we'll get enough traction here that we can have a meeting around digital humanity in a year from now or so. But stay in touch with digitalhumanity.co. Get engaged in this process. If we're really going to make a difference in how AI is conceptualized, it's not coming from the blue ribbon panel of Facebook execs. It's coming from the developers and the entrepreneurs that are sitting in this room. So thanks for your attention, and really appreciate it.